I want to go blast off right into. Oh my god. I am like nervous to even talk about this because I know it's going to be controversial, but we got to talk about it. Let's blast off into the Trump debunking stuff. So I'm actually going to start with an organization I don't really like as much, or an outlet I don't really like as much, which is Niche Gamer, because but I do want to start here because Niche Gamer, I think for a lot of people, is a primary source about this, and then I'm going to look into the analysis about it. You just started. I just woke up, Lamau. You all have like Anna sense. I've programmed you to be awake and ready to go the moment I start streaming. As long as it doesn't start another server fight. We're going to have to step in and moderate the content creator discussions more. We're going to have to. Because they're getting a little crazy. Okay, so let's blast off into it. So Trump signs executive order to contest payment processor censorship. So I'm going to read through this. And we're going to do something a lot of folks are not doing, which is we're actually going to read through the executive order. We're going to read through it. And then we're going to discuss it. Okay, so here we go. United States President Donald Trump signed an executive order on August 7th, which could have an impact on the ongoing censorship implemented by payment processors. The executive order, titled Guaranteeing Fair Banking for All Americans, addresses the ability of payment processors to punish individuals for quote-unquote constitutionally or statutorily protected beliefs, affiliations, or political views. Additionally, the bill calls for an end to clauses regarding quote-unquote reputation risk on the part of the payment processors. Payment processors like Visa, MasterCard, Stripe, and PayPal regularly claim that objectionable speech represents a quote reputation risk in attempts to financially disenfranchise content creators. Within 180 days of the date of this order, each appropriate federal banking regulator shall, to the greatest extent permitted by law, remove the use of reputation risk or equivalent concepts that could result in politicized or unlawful debanking, as well as any other considerations that could be used to engage in such debanking, from their guidance documents, manuals, and other materials other than existing regulations or other materials requiring notice and comment rulemaking, used to regulate or examine financial institutions over which they have jurisdiction. The removal of such concepts shall be made clear by each appropriate federal banking regulator through formal guidance to their examiners. The federal banking regulator shall also consider rescinding or amending existing regulations consistent with applicable law to eliminate or amend any regulations that could result in politicized or unlawful debanking, and to ensure that any regulated firm's or individual's reputation is considered for regulatory, supervisory, banking, or enforcement purposes solely to the extent necessary to reach a reasonable and apolitical risk-based assessment. Okay, so right off the bat, because we're going to talk about this, I really think people need to pay attention to the idea of politicized, to unlawful, to the idea that this is about legal, unlawful banking for engaging in legal content. I think additionally as well, when we read the full context of the executive order, because there is a lot missing from this excerpt, it will become clear that this is not really intended to have anything to do with the current payment processor situation with Steam, Itch.io, Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, Stripe, but it's specifically about political debanking, as in your political beliefs or involvement in actions such as, i.e., January 6th. So I do want to set that precedent right there that there is a lot of context missing from this excerpt. Early in the executive order, Trump gives examples of surveillance targeting potentially conservative citizens as the reason for his intervention. So it seems that the blow to adult content censorship may just be incidental. So I want to talk about this as well because we really actually don't know how this EO will even affect adult content creators or sex workers, which is why we're going to read through the whole thing together on stream to better understand it. For those who don't know, payment processors have become de facto censors of online platforms. Sites such as Pixiv, Patreon, Fansly, and more have been compelled to change their moderation practices under the threat that payment processors may scuttle their ability to do business. Most recently, Steam and Itch.io were forced to make changes, directly naming MasterCard, PayPal, and Stripe as the source of the censorship. There's an active change.org petition to draw attention to the issue, which you can check out here. Okay. So let's first, before we read the official EO, let's read some alternate interpretations. So let's start with Business Insider. Trump's latest executive order banning quote-unquote debunking takes aim at an industry that cheered his return. The summary from Insider from BI is a new executive order. Isn't it funny how BI is close to BO? A new executive order from President Donald Trump targets banks he believes are denying services to conservatives. Trump told CNBC on Tuesday that JP Morgan and Bank of America have refused to accept his deposits. You're going to want to pay attention to this. Crypto-connected Trump supporters like Mark Anderson made debunking a rallying cry in 2024. Interesting that Niche Gamer did not mention the crypto angle, even though that's actually a really core part to all of this. President Donald Trump made his feud with big banks official. After marking his grievances against banks clear earlier in the week, Trump signed an executive order for federal banking regulators to eliminate guidance that encourages what he calls, quote, politicized or, quote, unlawful debanking. According to the executive order and a White House fact sheet, the order requires various federal regulators and agencies to, quote, make reasonable efforts, quote, to reinstate debanked customers. The Treasury Department is tasked with creating a strategy and new regulations to prevent, quote, unlawful, quote, debanking, while the Attorney General would oversee and investigate cases of people suspected of being debanked in discriminatory ways. The Trump Organization and Eric Trump sued Capital One earlier this year for closing accounts in the wake of the January 6, 2021 riot. Capital One has denied wrongdoing and litigation is ongoing. Earlier this week, Trump told CNBC's Squawk Box, that's a weird name. Oh, that's a weird name. In an interview that Bank of America and JP Morgan Chase had previously refused to accept his deposits. They totally discriminate against, I think, me, maybe even more, but they discriminate against many conservatives, he told show host Andrea Ross Sorkin. I think the word might be Trump supporters more than conservatives. That's a really bad Trump impression, I'm sorry. In a statement to Reuters, JP Morgan, in a statement to Reuters, JP Morgan said it doesn't close accounts for political reasons, while Bank of America did not address Trump's claims. In January, at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Trump claimed Bank of America and other banks were refusing to accept conservative customers, which the Charlotte-based lender denied. Prior to the inauguration, crypto-connected supporters of the president turned debanking into a political issue. Please don't practice your Trump giantess ASMR. I took psychic damage reading that. Into a political issue. Well-known venture capitalist Mark Anderson said on Joe Rogan's podcast that dozens of tech founders had been cut off from banking services during former President Joe Biden's administration. Banks are just the latest industry to draw the president's ire, despite the fact that the securities and investment industry gave more to Trump than his opponent, former Vice President Kamala Harris. According to political donation tracker Open Secrets, wow, fell for it again award. Trump's cabinet also includes Howard Lutnick, a banker who ran Cantor Fitzgerald before becoming the Secretary of Commerce. The executive order could result in fines for banks found to have discriminated against conservatives, mimicking the White House's tactics for punishing other industries. Trump started his year by pulling funding from elite higher education institutions that he accused of condoning discrimination on campus. He soon pivoted to an ongoing legal battle with the country's biggest law firms, some of whom have represented clients in court cases against him. That is crazy. Okay. So now that we have gotten kind of two different interpretations, one more right of center, one more left of center, let's read the actual EO. Let me catch up with chat first. Yeah, we're going to read through all of it. The Trump move, I would assume, is to stop anyone banning fash content. This is cause of the Epstein files January 6th related, isn't it? Legal content is the thing. Like if Project 2025 gets what it wants, porn will be illegal, so this will make it worse, is my thinking. So it is important. It is important to... Hey, Shadowbug, I hope you're doing well. It is important to remember, really quickly. Oh, yeah, I forgot to read also. There's the New York Times article. This is kind of similar to the Business Insider one. I'll just go over it really quickly. President Trump signed an executive order Thursday aimed at stopping banks from barring customers for what he says are political or religious reasons. This is another thing that's actually missing from this conversation. That's actually about concerns of like Christians being debanked, which I think is probably more specifically like evangelicals and Christian nationalists in particular. An attempt to appease conservatives and cryptocurrency types who have complained about their treatment by Wall Street. The order deals with debunking, a catch-all term for claims of having been denied a bank account or loan for reasons unrelated to finances. It instructs various federal regulators and agencies to investigate the matter and, quote, make reasonable efforts, quote, to reinstate debanked customers. The order also raises the specter of federal prosecutions of banks by instructing regulators to refer some previous debanking complaints to the Attorney General's office. Major banks largely insist they are blameless for the closed accounts. Let's see. Once considered a fringe issue deployed by certain businesses who asserted they could not open bank accounts, the issue of debanking became more mainstream as right-leaning groups and even some liberals accused lenders of politically motivated discrimination. Republicans have kept the issue in the spotlight as Mr. Trump and even the First Lady Melania Trump insisted they or their family members were at one point or another denied a bank account. Some high-profile examples of so-called debanking remain unproven, including, thus far, many of Mr. Trump's claims. The issue gained traction, when crypto companies, a major backer of Mr. Trump's presidential run last year, began complaining that banks would not work with them. The White House, in materials released on Thursday, didn't specify the scope of the problem, but listed examples cited earlier by Senate Republicans that banks and payment processors investigated customers who made legal purchases at gun sellers or who used terms including Trump or MAGA while exchanging money electronically. These practices erode public trust in banking institutions and regulators, harm livelihoods, freeze payrolls, and impose significant financial burdens on law-abiding Americans, the White House said in a statement. Some of the actions announced Thursday did not require the impetus of an executive order as they involve federal agencies already led by Trump appointees. And other regulators had already made moves, including the Federal Reserve, which earlier this year ended a directive that required banks to provide advance notice before opening accounts for crypto clients. Okay. How different is the EO from the two GOP bills in committee? They sound pretty similar from the coverage. So the GOP bills I'm actually not familiar with. That I would have to sit down and look. I haven't taken as much time to look at the legalese aspect of it, the legislative aspect of all of this stuff, because I have been more focused on the larger the larger issue of how these things affect the gaming and content sphere beyond potential legal solutions. But the EO is one that a lot of people are talking about, and also the EO is one that people are sort of having like a they're sort of having a they're kind of looking a little bit like this over right now. They're looking a little like this over right now, so that's why I want to talk about it, because I think people are a little bit more like fat W easy clap about this than it actually is, because it is not intended to directly focus on the issues we are talking about. But I will talk. I will be fair about this, and I will talk about whether I think this will be good for us, because I do want to address that there are some changes to how payment processors and banks will operate. In response to this EO. So we'll talk about it. Okay, let me catch up with chat one more time before we dig into it. It's just for conservatives who do fraud or hate speech from our understanding. I think Daemonia is kind of tipping my hand, but that is kind of my takeaway, and I'll talk about that a little bit more. That's the other thing. Like, there's no way this is meant for everyone. The courts are super partisan right now and are not equal in who the law falls and who's exempt from the law. Well, it's important to understand, too, that this isn't even about the courts. This is about federal prosecutors. And so I'm going to talk about this, but federal prosecutors are not going to be going out of their way to, like, protect adult content creators or sex workers. Like, that is not going to happen when, that's not going to happen when this guy is in office. This guy is working with the Trump administration, Russ Vought. Like, there's no way. This guy is part of the administration, and his plan is, in fact, to find institutional ways to literally remove access to porn. So it's very unlikely that this EO is going to be put out and used as an opportunity to, like, go up against Russ Vought. And, like, it's important to remember as well that Russ Vought is, in fact, part of the Office of Management and Budget, which is part literally of the EO of the President of the United States, right? It is literally part of the executive branch. So it's very unlikely to me that someone who is literally the director of management and budget in in Trump's like administration is gonna sit there and be like, hit the button, Donald. Let's make it so MasterCard can let you look at porn. Like, that's not happening. That is not happening. There's no way. That's not happening. No way. It's not. Okay, so Daemonia is sort of connecting with how I feel, but we will talk about this because this does still change a little bit about banking in America, depending on how it's instituted. So let's read it and let's talk about it. Let's read it. I think it's more like the Puritans movement back in the late 1910s and early 1920s, which led to Prohibition when the 18th Amendment was passed. They believed that alcohol was the reason for all crimes in America, why husbands were beating their wives and children, spending money on alcohol. So I think the Prohibition thing is a really good example because while Prohibition was nationally removed, we have all of these like remnants of Prohibition in different states, like resulting in things like you can't go into a specific store to buy like alcohol, or like you can only buy alcohol in specific times of day in certain states. So Prohibition is actually a really good example of how like an incomplete activist work on prohibition has resulted in all of these states having really fucking weird laws about alcohol. Like, prohibition is not something we just like got rid of and like everything is based in easy clap right now. Like, prohibition's long shadow is still in America today, and I think a lot of people don't realize that because states have everything from like, oh yeah, you can buy beer in the grocery store, to like, if you put a single drop of alcohol in this Rite Aid, the cops are coming in. Like, it's like that in different places. Like, there's like ABC stores in Virginia, like for a reason, right? So, by the authority vested in me as president by the Constitution, the laws of the United States of America, it is hereby ordered. This is Donald Trump, executive order. Section 1, purpose. Financial institutions have engaged in unacceptable practices to restrict law-abiding individuals and businesses' accounts to financial services on the basis of political or religious beliefs or lawful business activities. Some financial institutions participated in government-directed surveillance programs targeting persons participating in activities and causes commonly associated with conservatism and the political right following the events that occurred at or near the United States Capitol on January 6, 2021. The federal government suggested that such institutions flag individuals who made transactions related to companies like Cabela's and Bass Pro Shop, or who made peer-to-peer payments that involved terms like Trump or MAGA, even though there was no specific evidence tying those individuals to criminal conduct. We need to talk about this really first. Like, this is one of the most important parts of the whole entire thing. This section, section 1, is not just a vibes-based section that kind of is like, oh, this is why we're doing it. This is telling banks and other financial institutions specifically what the Trump administration is nervous about. So specifically, this is about essentially anything to do with debanking people who are using Trump or MAGA, people who, I think it's kind of hidden here, but I believe this is about like gun purchases, right? This is about political or religious beliefs or lawful business activities. So this is about buying guns, this is about voting for Trump, and this is about being a God-fearing Christian. That is really important because what this is signaling to banks is these are the things that the Trump administration care about with the debanking issue. So I think that's really important to stress first. They're not mentioning video games, they're not mentioning sex, they're not mentioning adult content creators. Now, I will talk about how these regulations could still be a W for us, right? But this preamble is really important because it is like getting a message from the enemy army about where you plan to target. What the Trump administration is saying is we are specifically concerned about debanking of these issues. Political affiliation, if you're conservative. Religious affiliation, if you're like a far-right Christian. Lawful business activities, like you're buying guns. All right? Lawful business activities doesn't mean drawing porn, necessarily. It doesn't necessarily, by what Trump's writing, involve lolly show because it might be legal in some areas. It doesn't involve necessarily drawing content that like maybe a Christian organization might deem obscene and are trying to outlaw in your region. That's not what we're talking about here. The purpose section here makes clear to financial institutions what the Trump administration cares about and i.e. what federal prosecutors care about. So this is really important. Bank regulators have used supervisory scrutiny and other influence over regulated banks to direct or otherwise encourage politicized or unlawful debanking activities. Operation Choke Point, for example, was a well-documented and systemic means by which federal regulators pushed banks to minimize their involvement of individuals and companies engaged in lawful activities and industries disfavored by regulators based on factors other than individualized, objective, risk-based standards. Let me look into this really quickly. Operation Choke Point was an initiative of the United States Department of Justice beginning in 2013. Surprise, it's an Obama initiative, which investigated banks in the United States and the businesses that deal with firearm dealers, payday lenders, and other companies that, while operating legally, were said to be at high risk for fraud and money laundering. So things such as escort services are in there. Absolutely. And then also a bunch of other things from racist materials to coin dealers, credit card schemes, online gambling, money transfer networks, mailing list, personal info. All right. Now, remember, what the Trump administration is saying is that Operation Checkpoint was a well-documented and systemic means by which federal regulators pushed banks to minimize their involvement of individuals and companies engaged in lawful activities in industries disfavored by regulators based on factors other than individualized, objective, risk-based standards. Things like, wow, look at that, racist materials. We do have pornography in there, don't get me wrong, absolutely. And escort services as well, absolutely, don't get me wrong. But also, this is just another way of saying, see, firearms sales as well. We see from the first section that it sets the standard that the Trump administration is saying our concern is political activities. Our concern is biased against conservatives. Operation Checkpoint seemed to have some biases against firearm sales and as well, which is kind of what the inference of Cabela's and Bass Pro Shop is, and as well as some concerns with essentially firearm sales and potentially some far-right speech. So, let's continue. As a result, individuals, their businesses, and their families have been subjected to debanking on the basis of their political affiliations, religious beliefs, or lawful business activities, and have suffered frozen payrolls, debt, and crushing interest, and other significant harms to their livelihoods, reputations, and financial well-being. Such practices are incompatible with a free society and the principle that the provision of banking services should be based on material, measurable, and justifiable risks. Such practices, when welded to discriminate against customers and businesses in credit transactions due to their religion, are also unlawful under the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, 15 U.S.C. 1691, etc. I believe that's what that means. I'm not sure. They further undermine public trust in banking institutions and their regulators, discriminate against political beliefs and free expression of those beliefs, and weaponize a politicized regulatory state. Important to remember, once again, we are stressing the political beliefs aspect and stressing the religious aspect. Section 2, policy. It is the policy of the United States of America, the United States, that no American should be denied access to financial services because of their constitutionally or statutorily protected beliefs, affiliations, or political views, and to ensure that politicized or unlawful debanking is not used as a tool to inhibit such beliefs, affiliations, or political views. Banking decisions must instead be made on the basis of individualized, objective, and risk-based analyses. Again, we have the real reinforcement of the idea of this is about political views. And I think that this is a message very clearly being sent by the Trump administration, that a key focus from federal prosecutors and a key focus of the administration when looking at banks is they must not politicize debanking based on political affiliation. Section 3, definitions. A. The term, quote-unquote, politicized or unlawful debanking refers to an act by a bank, savings association, credit union, or other financial services provider to directly or indirectly adversely restrict access to or adversely modify the conditions of accounts, loans, or other banking products or financial services of any customer or potential customer on the basis of the customer's or potential customer's political or religious beliefs, or on the basis of the customer's or potential customer's lawful business activities that the financial service provider disagrees with or disfavors for political reasons. Once again, political. The The term federal banking regulators refers to the Small Business Administration and the federal member agencies of the Financial Stability Oversight Council, with supervisory and regulatory authority over banks, saving associations, or credit unions. So we are getting to how banks have to respond, and that also is equally important. We'll talk about it a little bit, but I hope it's clear based on what we've already read, right? That one, there's nothing here that's specifically saying that a lot of the debanking concerns do have to do with artistic expression. If that was the case, the executive order would go out of its way to mention that more freely. A lot of this is specifically about a political affiliation of members that are deemed conservative or far right. And so that seems to be the underlying current of this executive order. Now, I will say the ways I do think that this can still be OW for us, because I think there are some aspects of this that could. But I hope it's becoming clear the more I read the actual executive order that it seems to be focused more on a very narrow concern about debanking. It is kind of giving a W to the crypto folks and to the more far right folks that have had banking issues post J6. Of course, artistic expression is protected under the First Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. That doesn't mean federal prosecutors are going to go out of their way to protect you. I hope we all understand that there are things written in the law, and then there are actual things that prosecutors will do to protect you. If the federal government only cares about debanking on the basis of your political beliefs, then the executive order is only as good as protecting you based on your political beliefs. An executive order could theoretically pave the pathway to protect you, artists, adult content creators, sex workers, but the executive order is, one, not a law, and two, is about how the administration ultimately responds. People can just say stuff in an executive order. If federal prosecutors and the Trump administration very clearly and very specifically make this only about far-right debanking, then it is only a far-right debanking issue. Section 4, removing reputation risks and politicized or unlawful debanking. A, within 180 days of the date of this order, so this is, let's see, August 7th, so September, October, November, December. So this is sometime early next year. Each appropriate federal banking regulator shall, to the greatest extent permitted by law, remove the use of reputation risk or equivalent concepts that could result in politicized or unlawful debanking. Again, we need to stress politicized or unlawful debanking. Here refers to an act by a bank, savings association, etc., to directly or indirectly adversely restrict access to, etc., 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 on the basis of the customer or potential customer's political or religious belief, or on the basis of the customer or potential customer's lawful business activities that the financial service provider disagrees with or disfavors for political reasons. That is what the term politicized or unlawful debanking means. So if we go back to the Niche Gamer article, I believe they ripped this out of context without necessarily including what the definition is, when the definition makes it very clear, hey, this is about political debanking. It doesn't just mean, oh, the debanking's not lawful. It's your protected speech. It doesn't mean just that. This is why we see the specific phrase politicized or unlawful debanking, because it is a very precise term being defined within the EO that could result in politicized or unlawful debanking, as well as any other considerations that could be used to engage in such debanking. From their guidance, such debanking, again, going back to this, from their guidance documents, manuals, and other materials other than existing regulations or other materials required notice and comment rulemaking used to regulate or examine financial institutions over which they have jurisdiction. The removal of such concepts shall be made clear by each appropriate federal banking regulator through formal guidance to their examiners. The federal banking regulator shall also consider rescinding or amending existing regulations consistent with applicable law to eliminate or amend any regulations that result in politicized or unlawful debanking. There's that phrase again, that was defined specifically here. And to ensure that any regulated firm's or individual's reputation is considered for regulatory, supervisory, banking, or enforcement purposes solely to the extent necessary to reach a reasonable and apolitical risk-based assessment. basically saying you cannot assess whether someone has far-right political leanings when you are deciding whether they get a bank account. You either give them a bank account or you don't based on their financial risk. The SBA shall, within 60 days of the date of this order, give notice to all financial institutions with which guarantees loans under its lending programs, requiring that each financial institution that is subject to the SBA's jurisdiction and supervision, within 120 days of the date of this order, makes reasonable efforts to identify and reinstate any previous clients of the institution or any subsidiaries denied service through a politicized or unlawful debanking action in violation of a statutory or regulatory requirement under Section 7A of the Small Business Act 15 U.S.C. 636, or any requirement in a standard operating procedures manual or policy notice related to a program or function of the Office of Capital Access with notice of the reinstatement sent to the victim. This is important. I know it's legalese, but this is important. Is this the MasterCard Visa Fat W? If it is, in 4 months, you will see a bunch of sex workers get their accounts back. If they don't, and they probably won't, then this is not the Fat W. Within 120 days of the date of this order, identifies all potential clients denied access to financial services provided by the financial institution or any subsidiaries through a politicized or unlawful debanking action in violation of a statutory or regulatory requirement under Section 7A of the Small Business Act, or any requirement in a standard operating procedures manual or policy notes related to a program or function of the Office of Capital Access. It provides notice to each victim advising of the denied access and the renewed option to engage in such services previously denied. Again, if you do not see adult content creators who have lost their financial banking institutions and accounts talk about getting their stuff back, then this is not the Fat W. Within 120 days of the date of this order, identifies all potential clients denied access to payment processing services provided by the financial institution or any subsidiaries through politicized or unlawful debanking action in violation of a statutory or regulatory requirement under Section 7A of the Small Business Act, or any requirement in a standing operating procedures manual or policy notice related to a program or function of the Office of Capital Access, and provides notice to each victim advising of the denied access and the renewed option to engage in such services previously denied. Here is the real indicator. Do queer people, do LGBT content creators, sex workers, and adult content creators get their accounts back? And do they start getting notice that they're getting their accounts back? If they don't, then this is a very narrow EO that has not accomplished the end goals of what we are seeking to do, which is to significantly push back against payment processor censorship of adult content, sex workers, LGBTQ creators, and anyone who's deciding to talk about quote-unquote obscene material. What can be defined as obscene material, I should be specific, for political, cultural, or bigoted reasons. Section 5, scrutinizing politicized or unlawful debanking. Within 180 days of the date of this order, the Secretary of the Treasury, in consultation with the Assistant to the President for Economic Policy, shall develop a comprehensive strategy for further measures to combat politicized or unlawful debanking activities of financial regulators and financial institutions across the federal government, including consideration of legislative or regulatory options to eliminate such debanking. B, within 120 days of the date of this order, each federal banking regulator shall conduct a review to identify financial institutions subject to its jurisdiction that have had any past or current formal or informal policies or practices that require, encourage, or otherwise influence such financial institution to engage in politicized or unlawful debanking, and to take appropriate remedial action to the extent authorized and consistent with applicable law, including levying fines, issuing consent decrees, or imposing other disciplinary measures against any financial institution subject to the jurisdiction of such federal banking regulator that such federal banking regulator finds has engaged in politicized or unlawful debanking that violates applicable law, including Section 5 of the Federal Trade Commission, Act 15 U.S.C. 45, Section 1031 of the Consumer Financial Protection Act, 12 U.S.C. 5531, and the Equal Credit Opportunity Act. C. Within 180 days of the date of this order, the federal banking regulators shall review their current supervisory and complaint data to identify any financial institution that has engaged in unlawful debanking on the basis of religion, and if such financial institution is unable to obtain compliance with the meaning of 15 U.S.C. 1691 and 1691 E.g., refers such matters to the Attorney General for an appropriate civil action as appropriate. Again, this is not about debanking as a concept. This is not about the idea that anyone ever who gets debanked has the federal government's back. This is a very narrow and specific focus. A very narrow and specific focus. And I don't think the federal government is going to put the screws on payment processors and banks over adult content when it has been made clear that members of the Trump administration are anti-adult content. Section 6, General Provisions. Nothing in this order shall be construed to impair or otherwise affect I, the authority granted by law to an executive department or agency or the head thereof, or II, the functions of the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. Oh, isn't that interesting? The director of the Office of Management and Budget. Who is that guy? Who is that guy? Oh, it's the guy that hates porn. Whoa, no way. Isn't that fascinating? Wow, they even gave a little carve out to the director of the Office of Management and Budget relating to budgetary, administrative, or legislative proposals. You know, the guy that was caught on a secret camera saying that he hates porn and he thinks that porn needs to be removed so birth rate go up. They gave him a little carve out. They gave him a little carve out. They gave him a little carve out. This order shall be implemented consistent with applicable law and subject to the availability of appropriations. This order is not intended and does not create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any party against the United States, its departments, agencies, or entities, its officers, employees, or agents, or any other person. The cost for publication of this order shall be borne by the Small Business Administration. So there you go. Now, I think the fact that they gave this carve out to the guy that hates the porn, caught on secret camera saying I hate the porn, says it all. Although a lot of this is probably just literally about giving him room to basically like not like any further policy from him. It's probably also a carve out to like prevent financial institutions from beginning debanking again. But also I think this should be read as sort of like saying like, hey, all right though, but Roosevelt, whatever you want to do around the porn, this CEO is not about you, man. I think that's also a little bit of what this is saying too. But okay, so I want to talk about this overall. So overall, I think let me go back to the Niche Gamer article, right? So it's important to remember that the Niche Gamer article over here talks about how the EO addresses the ability of payment processors to punish individuals for constitutionally or statutory protected beliefs, affiliations, or political views, and about reputation risks. But if it does not mention the fact that politicized or unlawful debanking is not just like a throwaway phrase used in this paragraph, but is a very narrow and specific term defined by the executive order to define exactly how debanking will operate. It is not about the wider idea of debanking. And if you want proof of that, wait 6 months and see if any sex workers or adult content creators that have lost their banks have gotten notice saying that they are getting their account access back. What is clear to me is that the Trump administration with this order has basically said, hey, look, we are going after you if you are debanking the like Christian nationalists, the far right folks, and if you're going after like people who are buying like guns. But it is a narrow focus. If you want to debank other people, if you want to do some redlining, that's fine. That's fine. If you want to redline, if you want to discriminate, that's fine. But if you are discriminating against us, then it's a problem. Now, I'm going to say that there could still be a silver lining to all of this that I think is being missed by folks who don't really understand like what the EO actually means or the legalese of these kind of EOs and are ignoring the fact that it's a very precise ruling. And this is this. Because this does tackle the issue of debanking in a precise, narrow way, that is communicated upfront and throughout the EO, it could lead to an instance where payment processors and banks start ramping down debanking practices out of fear that this could become a larger federal policy that remains under a Democratic president, under fear that potential debanking options that have done towards non-far right figures could still come back to haunt them. So there is still the possibility that banks and federal institutions, banks and payment processors start taking a more like financial risk only oriented approach. Do I think that's likely? Actually, no, because we did have that one source claim that Visa was pressured by quote unquote government policy. We do have the fact that things like Screen and COSA are on the way, which suggests a larger push to make adult content access harder institutionally. Project 2025 literally argues, which Russ Vaught, guy that's in the White House right now on that fucking OMB that got a little carve out in the CO, Russ Vaught himself has literally gone on and said, Project 2025, which Russ Vaught was a core part of, has said that it wants an institutional, deplatforming of pornography down to the ISP level and to arrest people that create pornography. And it does seem overall that this is an administration that is in time going to move in the direction of institutionally deplatforming adult content. And I swear, if you guys don't know that the Project 2025 thing is real, I will literally bring it up right now. So I don't think that it doesn't make logical sense to me that the guy that's the director of the OMB gets like fucking shafted on his like take away the porn to raise the birthrights thing, because quite frankly, Project 2025, a lot of P2025 has been implemented, or we're seeing the signs that that was in fact something the administration wants to implement. And it just generally seems to me that the administration has no interest in like protecting pornography. Like that just, I think that's pretty obvious, right? I think it's pretty obvious. I do think there's some coping happening. I think a lot of people want like the Trump W and like to feel like Trump is going to sweep in and like actually protect the smut. But that's not happening, guys. Like, you're on your own. And I'm going to stress, like, Operation Choke Point is in fact a good example of the fact that this is a bipartisan concern. Guys, how many times have we had bipartisan bills basically trying to deplatform and ban sex workers? Your local politician is not coming to your aid unless they're like Julia Salazar. Basically not part of the mainstream. So, no Trump W. Could it cause a ripple effect that leads to less debankings from financial institutions? Potentially. But I'm not seeing anything here that suggests that the broader concept of debanking is going away. It seems more likely to me that the Trump administration decided to carve out a very narrow and specific focus. I would say, Jace, if you are optimistic, to read through Project 2025 again, which does outline specifically the key goals of this administration. And let me actually pull it up right now. Project 2025 PDF. From the Presidential Transition Project. All right, right in the opening. Let's see. Today, America and the conservative movement are enduring an era of division and danger akin to the late 1970s. Now, as then, our political class has been discredited by wholesale dishonesty and corruption. Look at America under the ruling and cultural elite today. Inflation is ravaging family budgets, drug overdose deaths continue to escalate, and children suffer the toxic normalization of transgenderism, with drag queens and pornography invading their school libraries. Pornography manifested today in the omnipresent propagation of transgender ideology and sexualization of children, for instance, is not a political Gordian knot inextricably binding up disparate claims about free speech, property rights, sexual liberation, and child welfare. It has no claim to First Amendment protection. Its purveyors are child predators and misogynistic exploiters of women. Their product is as addictive as any illicit drug and as psychologically destructive as any crime. Pornography should be outlawed. The people who produce and distribute it should be imprisoned. Educators and public librarians who purvey it should be classed as registered sex offenders. Guys, they want to basically say I should be a register as a sex offender. And telecommunications and technology firms that facilitate its spread should be shuttered. Guys, I'm just wondering here, who wrote this? Who wrote this? Who was one of the guys that wrote this? I'm just, that's the big words. Oh, what's this? Russ Vought is a founder and president of the Center for Renewing America. A longtime conservative leader on Capitol Hill, Russ served in President Trump's cabinet as director of the Office of Management and Budget, where he oversaw the implementation of the presidential budget, key policies on deregulation, and landmark effort to eliminate critical race theory and other radical ideologies in executive agencies. Whoa, no way. Are you telling me the same Russell Vought who... Well, no way. Are you telling me that the acting director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the deputy director of the Office of Management and Budget, this guy? No way. Are you telling me the guy that is literally in office right now under Trump wrote that? No way. They got a carve out of the EO? No way! Guys, the copium is so real. Dude, this guy is gonna take your porn away. And it's under Trump. Like, he said it, bro! He wrote it in the thing! He said it outright! He was like, people that create pornography should be in jail! Of course he's not gonna, protect, your bank account! Bro! There's a problem! These are the collective shout of America, guys. And they are in office. Guys. Guys, this whole entire thing, just take out the word propagation of transgender ideology and put in like porn ideology, and Collective Shout could have written this exact paragraph. They are not two separate people. They're the same people! They're the same! They're in office! Guys! Come on! It's the same people! They wrote the thing! They said they were gonna do it, and now they're doing it! Okay. It's just like Niche Gamer and everyone else. It's just this, man. It's just this, dude. It's just copium. Yeah, that was Project 2025 I was reading. I think it's very obvious to me that Trump wants to continue to be in power beyond his second term. I think it's just obvious. One of the architects of 2025 is in office and has his own clause in the new EO. Who could have seen this coming? Me when the... This is hell and we are in hell. Self-proclaimed Christian nationalist. There is a really good book about all this that a policy friend wrote. Called American Fascism, How the GOP is Subverting Democracy. So Bryn Tannehill, who does a lot of policy work, wrote this. And I read it when it came out, and I was like, wow, this is a lot. This is very scary, and this seems like a very plausible thing that could happen. Now, this book goes over policy moves. It's not about like vibes or cultural stuff. It's about like, here are the specific policy and like institutional decisions that this element that's politically established in society due to the first administration is going to target over the next couple of years. And Bryn just kind of hit the nail on the head. Like, she was just correct about it all. So yeah. So I'm guessing the EO is bad. Yeah, the EO is, I mean, like, the EO, it does set the precedent that, like, debanking needs to stop, but I'm not really it's very clear that the Trump administration only has problems with debanking if it's about, like, their own allies and advocates. I hope people understand that the debanking concern is very specifically about, like, you know, like, the right getting debanked. Give me that book. I got you, baby. I got you, baby. This is also under the assumption that the next candidate will have the exact same views and beliefs as Trump in his cabinet. I think it's very likely that the Republican right, like, gives birth to a further far right entity that's actually competent. Guys, I understand how you guys feel about Trump, but the literal longest Trump can go for is 10 years, 2 terms, and 2 extra years if he's vice president. Something happens to the president beyond that, he cannot be president any longer. The American people will vote for someone else. I don't know if that's true. I think it's very likely that he's just going to try to hold on to power. I just think that that's going to be the case. I'm actually a pessimistic person who believes in Murphy's Law and Sod's Law. I find it's easier to go through life like everything is going to fall apart at any moment, so plan for all kinds of different situations and scenarios. Wasn't keeping Trump in power part of Project 2025 forever? I think it's obvious that he's going to be in power for a long time. I hope it's obvious, guys, that they are very clearly going to keep targeting adult content, and that the administration is not coming to save you. They can always only selectively enforce it, even if it could be interpreted in a pro-sex work way. Yeah, exactly. A federal EO, when the federal government puts out an EO, that's often about how executive branch departments and offices operate. So it is important to stress with this EO, the EO only operates to the rhythm, to the music, to the song that the head of the executive branch puts out. And who's the head of the executive branch? Well, it's Donald Trump. So if Donald Trump says, I want to focus specifically on getting me and Melania, he doesn't speak in a southern accent, I want to get me and Melania my bank accounts back, and all my supporters at J6 should get their bank accounts back, then that's what the executive order is going to be. And that's clearly what the executive order's goal is. Hey, Anna, remind me what happened in the Air Force the other day with the trans vets. Oh my God. Like, there was further explanation about what's going on with that, but there is indeed like certain trans members, certain vets in the Air Force who are transgender. Certain veterans of the Air Force are, depending on how long they served, losing like their retirement fund. This is an administration who's obviously very hostile to anyone who's not like part of the mainstream, like, American identity. Adult content creators, sex workers, trans people. Say goodbye to your 401k from crypto fraud. Now, I do think the fact that like there's a lot of things under what was it, Operation Checkpoint or whatever that we're focused on could be another silver lining, that banks and financial institutions start to pull away a little bit from some of their traditional redlining practices of sex workers and adult content creators. But I do kind of feel like saying that is copium huffing. Like I am not sitting here hoping that like we actually end up getting a fat W out of all this. It just seems very likely to me that like this is like no more debanking for me, but not for thee.